Hello, welcome to the Entrepreneurs Network. I'm Rick Anthony. Today's guest entrepreneur doesn't preside over a startup or an early stage company. His company, C-Wright, has been around for more than 20 years, disrupting technology across multiple industries. He describes C-Wright as, and now I'm quoting from the website, a collective of engineers, creatives, writers, and marketeers who are passionate about driving a business forward using technology and innovation. And he describes himself as an Internet of Things expert, providing exceptional value to existing and emerging businesses through the elimination of traditional technology barriers across all industries. C-Wright's value proposition, says founder and CEO Joe Callahan, is his firm's proficiency in rapid development of interoperability of enterprise applications for leading and legacy platforms in various industries. Joe, welcome to the Entrepreneurs Network. Now, if you would please, would you decipher what I just said?
We make business processes and the information associated with those processes readily available in a mobile environment such that it's meaningful for not only the back office, but for the users themselves. Okay,
so you developed, as I understand it, a general purpose technology platform that has multiple applications. And as I understand it, you've been building your business over the past 20 years by applying that general purpose platform in a variety of verticals, business verticals?
Correct.
Specific applications.
Specific applications.
To achieve the objectives of efficiency and greater productivity, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, before I get lost in any more of that, as we always do, your background. You were born and raised in North Philadelphia, Northeast Philadelphia?
North Philadelphia.
Went to North Catholic?
North Catholic.
And then
Drexel University.
And how did you wander into the business, and your own business at that?
Well, being an entrepreneur since a young age of 7, 8 years of age.
Really?
And I didn't know that until probably I was 25 or 30 that it was called an entrepreneur.
What were you doing?
Selling pretzels, paper route, washing cars. At any given time, I'd have 2 or 3 jobs at the early age of second, third grade. So
I have to tell you about my little wagon. Okay, take groceries.
So upon graduation from Drexel and having the opportunity to work for General Motors, Johnson & Johnson, Scott Paper, and York International.
In what capacity?
At all different capacities. So at Johnson & Johnson, I was a production supervisor. Largest Band-Aid manufacturing facility in the world up in New Brunswick, New Jersey. At General Motors, an industrial engineer, working on standard data analysis on how vehicles were put together.
So you had an engineering background?
Engineering background from Drexel.
Okay.
Yep. Scott Paper, a computer programmer on an old IBM System 38. But what became very apparent to me is that the path to wealth was through sales. That any organization, is driven by their sales and their pipeline. And whether they're a capital equipment manufacturer or whether they're a professional services organization, they have an intense requirement to feed the pipeline and drive business through the sales operation. So while employed at York International, they had a Burroughs word processor, and I was a sales engineer. There was no CRM system or any means of organizing the pipeline, and that's where C-Wright actually was born. It was born as a Lotus database platform that I built and organized around the methodology of selling capital equipment into a very complex world.
The incongruity of all of this is that today's entrepreneurs, the young ones, the millennials, probably wouldn't know what you were talking about. Lotus, you know what I mean? I remember what it meant, but it's curious that only one generation, and all of that is ancient history. It's been moving so quickly.
Yeah, what most people don't realize that Lotus was not just a spreadsheet application, it was actually a database as well. So it had the functionality of maintaining relationships of many to one back to the object at hand.
You had an epiphany, as I recall. This obviously isn't the first time we have visited. You were on the beach with your wife and family, and it hit you that you didn't want to be on anybody else's payroll.
Well, there were a few epiphanies, but the realizing that the path was through sales.
Yes.
The epiphany was to start my own sales business of some nature, selling something. And that's where 2 companies were formed that I organized the manufacturer's representative firm and an importer for products and technologies from the UK in the medical field. And the third company that was started was C-Write. And the epiphany around C-Write was as a mobile application development company in the pen-based applications for businesses on mobile tablets in 1993.
Yeah, you were way ahead of your time. You really were. At least as I understand it, you were way ahead of your time. There weren't that many people talking about apps back then, were there?
Well, in 1993, I don't think there was anyone talking about apps
Yeah.
at all. We called it the killer app back
Okay.
then. And we had the opportunity of being involved with several companies on the West Coast that were heavily involved with the prior API sets to Palm computing and you know, the process around building interfaces through a grid on a screen.
So you rode that wave that usually occurs coming from the west to the east? Just about everything that's new and innovative?
Well, I like to believe that the innovation starts here in Philadelphia, and that they caught the wave, okay? And they've just been riding it longer than we have.
You said you were a early, young entrepreneur. Do you come from a family of entrepreneurs?
If I had to identify the individual, it would be my grandmother.
Yeah?
Yeah, absolutely.
What was her specialty?
She had opened a luncheonette in the late 60s, I guess early 70s, to provide a place of employment for my uncle, who has Down syndrome, has a handicap. And when he graduated from high school, she needed a place for him to work. So while my grandfather was a plumber for the Bud Company, manufacturing trains, she wanted to open up a luncheonette because she was a great cook and provide the breakfast and lunches as meals to the knitting industry, the milling industry, all throughout Erie Avenue in Philadelphia. And that's absolutely where I got the entrepreneurial...
Did you work there?
I worked there. I ran the cash register. I bussed tables. I delivered orders. And
How long was she in business?
she sold the business in 1978 and moved to Brigantine, New Jersey. And I still remember the conversation. She did that because she saw Philadelphia changing. She saw the knitting industry moving to the Carolinas and that the city was going to go through change. And I was in 8th grade at the time.
One of the reasons I was interested in having you on the show is not just to talk about the great work you have done, are doing, and will be doing, but also because of your vision. Again, spending some time with you, you've got some interesting insights and an interesting perspective on where the world is going, where big data is going, there's that phrase again, and the whole notion of predictive analytics and getting ahead of people and getting ahead, kind of having them come at you, and you know exactly where they're coming from, the pace at which they're moving, what they want, et cetera, et cetera. A scary kind of world, at least from my perspective, but I'm an old guy and I'm not used to this kind of stuff. But that seems to be where we're headed. I don't want to jump into that right away. But could you give us some examples of the kinds of things that C-Write is doing without disclosing anything you don't want to? Because we're not going to sign an NDA here.
So what we've been able to do, over the past 20 years is, we've committed hundreds of thousands of man hours, hundreds, to build a platform that is all of our technology. And meaning that it's all our technology, that we don't pay a license to any of the big name software companies that are out there today. So we're able to take our general purpose technology and we're able to apply it to any organization that has employees, revenue lines, customers for whom they service, the engagements, the contracts that they service their clientele with, and the assets that are in their world, the buildings, the vehicles, the things, and that's where the Internet of Things comes from. And we can organize all that information in a meaningful manner without the use of spreadsheets that is connected through a visual interface at the app level or from a kiosk level that's connected back to the enterprise with interoperability to their legacy systems.
Okay, I understood every other word, and I think I get the gist of it. But you're not the only one who does that. So what makes you different?
There are several unique things within our platform that we protect, very heavily as our trade secrets that we have not been able, that we've not filed for patents on. And the reason for that is the technology will far outlive a 20-year life of a patent. And we have not found another company that's really doing exactly what we do once you peel back the onion or look under the hood. Because we have one application that services the needs of the entire world.
Yeah. I think I've heard you say that you wake up in the morning and your system will have monitored the world in 150 different sectors, or am I articulating that correctly?
So we look at it by business types.
Okay.
Yeah, so we look at the economy based on roughly around 230 to 240 business types in America. And a business type is how you answer the question when you're asked in a public setting, okay, you know, who do you work for, without stating the name. So I work for a school district, I work for the state, or I work for an accounting firm, I work for a law firm, I work for a manufacturer. Once you address that question and define that business type, that details for us the process or the playbook that you need to be running in order to compete, you know, with the 15 million companies in America.
Yeah. So does that mean you are constantly monitoring each one of those 200 and some?
So each one of those business types, we are constantly iterating, engaging how many of them are there and what kind of transition they're going through. How many law firms are there in the country? How many manufacturers are there in the country? How many universities?
From where do you gather the data?
Predominantly in the public domain, you know, with various HTML parsers and scrubbers that just pull data in on a regular basis, looking at it by city, population by population.
And it's entirely automated. There's nobody sitting at screens monitoring what's going, monitoring the news, CNN, et cetera, et cetera.
So
to provide input.
well, we've got a lot of human interaction as well with, you know, organizing the data in a more meaningful manner. You know, but it's highly automated as well as efficient for capturing.
And is that offering a subscription service? If I'm a law firm, a large law firm, and I want to know what's going on in the industry, trends, who's growing, who's merging, do I subscribe to that database?
No, that's not a service. That's
service.
strategic information that we utilize
That just provides
internally.
you the context for your business. Is that it?
Correct.
Okay. Can you share with us what you're doing in the automotive industry?
Absolutely. So we were contacted through one of our channel partners to assist Ford in a disruptive offering to allow for a more engagement, you know, at the consumer in a retail environment. So Ford has 5 vehicles in the mall. In this case, they're King of Prussia Mall. They're accompanied by 3 gesture-based interactive kiosk towers that allow a consumer to approach the tower and get the application that's associated with the experience, and then they can unlock the car, get into the vehicle, they can schedule a test drive and show up for their test drive, all with a different process around the retail experience of buying a car, as opposed to having the salesman, you know.
So you walk up to this piece of hardware, kiosk-like thing.
Think of it as a giant mobile phone.
Giant mobile phone. And you walk up to it, and you stand right in front of it, and with your hand, you navigate your way through the program, right? And while you're standing there looking at this mechanical thing, it's got sensors in it, they're picking up data.
It's looking at you.
Yeah, and profiling you.
Definitely.
And that data goes into a huge database. What happens then?
So the simple parameters that we all look at, it estimates your age, it estimates, you know, your gender, you know, it estimates your ethnicity. It gauges your emotional response. So it's going to read the expression on your face with whether or not you're smiling or, you know, what else you're experiencing. It measures how long you're in front of it. It measures how long you're looking at the screen, so your dwell time as well as the encounter time. And then it measures the entire experience from a standpoint that there's no longer a process from a survey required, that as things are liked and consumed by relevant content, the appropriate content is rendered. That's the more frequent or the more engaging content.
And is what you just described, the secret sauce and what you do and the way you do it, the integration of all of those elements? Because I think there are other companies who do parts of it, reading emotions, for example, and moods, and turning those into dots and dashes and so on that end up in a database, and then the interpretation of that. You do all of that and more.
And the real secret sauce, and there's a lot of various recipes inside the kitchen, but the real secret sauce is our patent portfolio with the re-rendering of the content on the screens.
Okay.
So once that content is presented, there's environmental variables surrounding that content in the screen. They come back to a platform where then subsequent analytics are run to change what's on the screen. So the screen adapts to you and the environment in real time.
And C-Wright developed the hardware and the software.
Yeah, every component, all the PCBs, the printed circuit boards, all of the software.
That seems to be a common theme in what I've heard previous to this meeting and again here. That is, we don't want to be beholden to anybody else. We build our own from scratch. We own it. We don't disclose it. It's under the hood, and it's not important that you know what's under the hood. All you have to know is turn the key and it goes. It's that simple. And as I understand it, what you're doing now is identifying very targeted, very specific application opportunities, potentials, to take your basic platform, then create the interface with your platform for a specific application. How does that work, for example, in healthcare?
Well, in healthcare, there's
Huge
several
opportunity.
huge opportunities.
Right.
There's several areas that there are just not enough hours in the day for the staff to service the people. You know, whether it's to communicate a message on the prescription of a drug to be consumed. So, given for example, if the doctor prescribes the drug to the patient, the doctor now spends a very small amount of time, based on the constraints of the industry, with that patient to describe, you know, what are the potential side effects and what's the real importance for them to take the medicine. And to the extent that 30% of all prescriptions that are written are not filled.
Right.
So think of the side effects associated with that. Well, with our technology, okay, the physician is able to pre-record his message to the patient specific by the medication. As he's pre-recorded it, that patient then experiences the physician after his message has been, you know, editorial rights and approval rights by the pharmaceutical company. He then presents that information to the patient as if it's him. And it's a video recorded process. While that is being presented, the patient is being observed by the system. So the patient, you know, the 6, 7 side effects and the importance of those 6, 7 side effects, the system measures the human emotion and the response, whether or not they were paying attention and whether or not they actually consumed the information.
And you say that the physician, the individual physician, records the presentation?
He records the presentation as if he's presenting to the patient.
Why is that? Why wouldn't there be an anonymous voice?
Well, the patient, I mean, the patient and the physician and their connection and their relationship is going to be much more, you know, from the confidentiality component, et cetera.
But I don't want to get too detailed on that one, but some physicians are better presenters than others. Most are not.
Yeah.
So they have to be trained, coached?
Well, you know, everyone's different, and every situation's different. Not to say that the company cannot have a spokesperson to deliver it. I mean, that's inside.
Now, the example you gave us in the mall with Ford, and that example where the patient is sitting in front of a machine again and is being profiled through various sensors and...
Profiling is a strong word.
Okay. Okay. What's the better word?
Observed.
Observed. And does the patient, in the case of the healthcare, have to agree to be observed by the machine?
It's terms of use, right? So it needs to be disclosed. It needs to be disclosed and identified.
Okay. When I walk up to that, what I'm calling a kiosk at King of Prussia Mall, and do I have to give permission for that machine to observe and collect data on who I am, what I'm likely to do?
There's also terms of use on the kiosk.
On the kiosk. Yep. So I have to first say accept, as you do with any app?
They're available.
And they're available. Okay. All right.
And then we track viewed terms of use by encounter.
Right. What other applications do you see for this marvelous technology that you can share with us?
Retail.
Yeah?
Yeah, retail. We'll be releasing a product in January that...
But once again, help me understand this. From what I hear, from what I read, and the deal flow I see through the Entrepreneurs Network, a lot of this stuff, you walk into a mall and you're all, before you get through the door, if you've got your iPhone with you, you're already being observed, monitored. They know exactly who you are, where you're going, what you bought, what you're likely to buy, et cetera, et cetera. That's already in place. What is it you do that adds value to what is already available or kicks it up a notch in some way?
We're just scratching the surface. You know, most of the information that's pushed out to people that's been, you know, observed or derived through algorithms, it's things that people are trying to sell you know, to the consumers that they may not be interested in. So we believe that the entire shift will occur, that the consumer will take back the time. and the consumer will begin to say when I can be interrupted, what I should be interrupted for, and here's what I'm interested. And most importantly, here's what I'm not interested.
Yeah.
To kind of reduce the traffic of the
Okay.
spamming and the,
So it'll help the consumer be more discriminating and set limits on this barrage of information that's coming at them, and customized, obviously. It's a whole new world. I have a young chap who's already presented at the Entrepreneurs Network, and they're building an app just for the millennials. I shouldn't say just for, but it's the millennials who are interested in it, and it's a social calendar. Said millennials don't use regular calendars anymore, you know, a Google or a Microsoft. Whatever. This one is interactive, and it helps to create community and socializing and keeping other millennials, friends and so on, in touch with one another, and then planning. And when I heard it, I thought, once again, I've heard of bits and pieces of that from other people. Maybe these guys have really put it together. They've already raised well over $1 million because somebody says that's got legs. There's a pony in there someplace. And as you have just said, he feels they're just beginning to scratch the surface with not just the technology, because that exists, but the application of the technology and some of the nuances that can be built into it. It seems to be where you are going as well. I know that, again, one of the reasons I wanted you here was that you're constantly jotting down ideas, new applications that are beyond the view of most people, because you don't live in the present, you seem to live in the future. Is that a fair statement?
that's
Yeah. So what do you see out there? Where are we headed? And is this apparent march towards the ubiquitous predictive analytics, what is the world we're going to be living in? Not 30 years from now, but from what I've heard you say in the past, we're just about there. Certainly the technology is there, the capability is there. What's life going to be like in 5 years as a consumer, as an old consumer?
as an old consumer. If you consider the advancements and at the rate that it's occurring, you know, the microprocessor and the speed and what it's able to do, you know, will continue to follow Moore's law for years to come. So the CPU power, you know, that's readily available today is astonishing compared to where we were 20 years ago. And most people can't comprehend how much faster.
Yeah.
You know, if you compile that with the bandwidth speeds, okay, that continue to increase, compounding at 60, 70%, a year. Okay, also astonishing. Now put in storage capacity, so to be able to store data, okay, that's of any capacity for perpetuity. So those three components are heavily commoditized, and they're a fraction of the component in delivering a solution. So the technology revolution that ended with the information revolution, has been now replaced with the creative age. Because if you
creative
age, we declared, okay, that the information revolution ended on March 17th, 2013. It's over, and that we are now in the creative age. So if you can imagine it, it can be created from an information solution set, which is why you're seeing this vast number of startups in a service-based solutions for software. I mean, it is an enormous industry, and it will follow the path of that of electricity being utilized, from 1900 to 1930.
But follow that analogy. Electricity was finally regulated and is controlled.
It wasn't until the 1950s.
Yes.
Okay.
So it was the Wild West with electricity.
We
are now in the Wild West.
We're in the Wild West.
Yeah. With this in the creative age.
In the creative age.
Okay. When do you see when do you see consolidation as well as regulation?
Well, the regulation won't occur until the activist groups get enough of the support, to affect legislation. So I don't think the legislation is going to happen for at least a decade. For lack of will, or simply because our legislators don't understand what we're dealing with yet? It's a more complex equation than that, because the legislators are engaged with the Wild Wild West. I mean, they're all investors and individuals like we all are. Right? So they've got their own agendas for various matters. It just doesn't need the regulations yet.
Well, even with, and maybe it's not apropos, but with the headline story now with Target and the hackers who got into that, and the mess that Target has, its customers have, and other retailers have now, if only for fear of being hacked. Isn't that enough to push for some kind of regulation, legislation?
Yeah, that legislation and regulation is all around security, encryption, and processes.
Yes.
Most hacking occurs today because someone's password was compromised because they were irresponsible with their password, and then someone got access to the system. You know,
Would fast forward, if you were starting your company today, would it be easier today than it was 20 years ago?
absolutely.
It would be easier?
Yes.
Because so much already exists. But there's more competition today than when you had in...
So, I mean, it would be easier to start it.
Yes.
It would, you know, in order to build what we have.
Okay.
But
All
to
right.
start it, it absolutely would be easier.
Oh, to your earlier point, there are apps popping up all over the place. On the other hand, just because you can doesn't mean you should. I mean, there's so much junk that's out there now, at least in what I see, again, as part of the deal flow, and others like me. Go back to, please, your vision of the future, and relate that to the Philadelphia region. I remember when I was in your demonstration area, the entire wall was a historical chronicle of the evolution of the economy, I guess. Starting with what, the Iron Age or something, but working its way up to and through the Information Age, etc. And I asked George, your partner, what's that all about? And he said, well, that's Joe's idea for instead of Delaware Valley, it's Liberty Valley. Well, what's Liberty Valley? Village.
Liberty Valley.
Liberty Valley. Well, what's Liberty Valley? And we had only a short period of time to visit and talk. Can you tell us what you envision for the Philadelphia region, the Delaware Valley? What is Liberty Valley?
Well, if you take a quick path through history and think about what Philadelphia was like, you know, in the 1700s, the largest city outside of London in all of the British colonies. And it became, okay, an era that changed the world. It was because of the people from Philadelphia. If you consider what they went through the agricultural revolution, through the industrial revolution, through the technology revolution. But back up, you know, we lost the fact that we were the center for government, finance, and education. Okay? The computer was invented in Philadelphia. I mean, University of Pennsylvania, 1947. It was the birth of the technology revolution. Yet we lost that to the West Coast. And there are several reasons around why you know, Silicon Valley became what it is. And it all, you know, was out of the education grant from the government and focused in the environment. And we lost the information age to the West Coast. I mean, we you know, the dot-com era clearly, you know, went to the West Coast. So we declared that Liberty Valley, okay, will win, okay, the creative age. And we will challenge Silicon Valley and anything that they're bringing forward with the creative minds and the passion and the drive and the grit of people in Philadelphia.
To do that, you have to create a consortium here.
True.
And a lot of pieces, and a lot of folks who don't share the vision, or either can't, won't, whatever. They're reactionaries. They want to protect whatever we now have. How do you propose to get over all of that? And is your vision only for millennials? Only for young people who aren't burdened with the past, aren't burdened with history, aren't burdened with tradition, and aren't concerned about preserving the future, if only because they're not happy with the future. The present. They're not happy with the present. They want to get on with it. There's a question in there someplace.
So in rising tides, all boats are lifted.
Yeah.
In Philadelphia, unfortunately, there's several different tides. So there's a tide schedule. So there's not a common goal. And if you look at the investment community, if you look at, you know, historically over the past 20 years, there's a lot of cards that are kept very close to the vest, and people don't share information openly. If we all shared information openly, similarly to how the Japanese automobile industry did in the 70s, okay, for a common goal, they clearly surpassed the U.S. automotive environment.
But that was the point. They decided they were going to take on Detroit, and they did, and surpassed us. Interesting. So when will we see evidence of the Liberty Valley? When are you going to roll that out?
We formally announced it 2 years ago.
You did?
Yes.
I missed that.
So you're in it right now. So as the word gets spread virally, through Metcalfe's law, it'll reach the 8 million people sometime by a rate of the square over the next 6,
You're doing
12
it
months.
again. Okay. I feel as if we've just scratched the surface. Maybe you'll come back sometime in the future when you have another breakthrough to share with us. Until then, thanks very much. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
The company, again, is C-Wright, located out in West Conshohocken. It's an interesting place. It's a creative, innovative environment. It's too bad you can't get more people through there. You should have tours going through there. Until next time, this is the Entrepreneurs Network. I am Rick Anthony. Take very good care of yourselves.